started. Hello, my name is Carla Osorio, and I'm part of Community Education for Social Action. We're really excited. We're really excited. This is happening today. Our event, Gentrified LA, reclaiming communities, empowering neighborhoods. Just like with some logistics, if you need to use the restroom, we have restrooms outside. And also, is anyone parked in Puente Learning Center? Okay, they close at 8 p.m. So just be aware that you have to go move your car. No, parking is not that great here. So anything else? Oh yeah, cell phones. Please turn off your cell phones. We also have food. If you need to go for seconds, they're gonna be selling their food. So thank you so much. Thank you, Racketeers, for coming. Andrea just suggested just 3 people in line, so it won't get too crowded. Alrighty, so thank you for coming. Just before we start, I want to give a little introduction of Community Education for Social Action, CESA. CESA, we are a grassroots collective working with working class communities, educating ourselves about social issues to take political action. We have been around for 3 years. This is our 3rd year. We started in 2011. And we started with the project with Montebello Bicycle Coalition. So we work in the greater East LA. And some of our friends were like, oh, we bike in Montebello, we need bike lanes. So we're like, hey, how about we start a campaign? So that's how Montebello Bicycle Coalition started. We also have a garden, a community garden. It's called Jardín Abundancia. And it's a seasonal garden. Right now we're in transition, so we're renovating it. And we're going to be building more raised beds. So if anyone would like to volunteer, you can talk to some of our CISA corps. Can you just raise your hand if you're part of CISA? Yay! So if you want to volunteer, you can talk to us. And we also have a new project, which is Community Fitness Series. We started last September. It's really fun. Sometimes we don't want to go to the gym by ourselves, so we don't want to pay for a gym. So we have a beautiful community here in Boyle Heights, and we're like, hey, how about we should just use the community? So we organize hikes, we organize collective walks, juicing. So it's going to start in September, and we're going to have a calendar in our. You can also like us on Facebook if you have Facebook. We also collaborate with other collectives to develop projects. We were part of Primavera Festival, we're also part of Liberation School, and we are currently also on the FACE Collective with El Comité de Esperanza to save Larderwood. And we have one Luis Salinas here, and he's going to be talking more about the campaign and how they're resisting gentrification. So now we're going to have Andrea, and she's going to give you an introduction of what gentrification is.
So real quick, we just also want to thank our volunteers. There's people here who helped set up, our volunteers and everyone who came here, including the Racketeers who are volunteering their time to fundraise. This is their first fundraiser, so please round of applause. And it's a volunteer-run organization, so people here put a lot of heart and a lot of time, and so we're really grateful to everyone who's helped us. We're also extremely grateful to our panelists who have also volunteered for us today, and are coming up from all over Los Angeles, so if we could please have a special applause for them. Thank you very much. Okay, so this is just a little bit of a little intro for you all. So what was originally a land inhabited by the Tonga, Gabrielino, and Chumash Native American tribes was, for all intents and legal purposes, founded in 1781 by the Spaniards as El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora, la Reina de los Ángeles de la Porrincula. What is now known as the global city called Los Angeles was part of Mexico in 1821 after the Mexican-American War, and then allegedly purchased by the U.S. as part of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. In 1781, what began with a population of 44 people is now a global city with 9.8 million people. This city of staggering, vibrant, diverse, official and non-official neighborhoods, barrios, regions, sides, and more is just as descriptive with its variety of spaces. So there's groupings of neighborhoods such as the West Side, East Side, Midtown, Hollywood. There's ethnic and industrial enclaves like Little Tokyo, historic Filipino town, Little Ethiopia, Little Armenia, and the unofficial Byzantine Latino quarter. Implied ethnic-specific areas like Westlake, aka MacArthur Park. I actually didn't know there was a difference. I thought it was called MacArthur Park. Pico Union, Elysian Heights, Silver Lake, and South Central. And there's also districts like the Flower District, Skid Row District, and the Arts District. And although today we'll be discussing the infamy of spaces subject to the phenomena of residential and economic shifts that compromise and displace core urban areas, it is arguable that the governmental infrastructure of Los Angeles is vulnerable to the harsh effects on working class communities beyond places like the one that we already commented on, Echo Park, Silver Lake, Highland Park, downtown and Boyle Heights. So who is at risk of being gentrified? Who can gentrify? How do communities work towards equitable housing, education, and working rights? How can a community work towards to erase negative depictions that label them as dangerous neighborhoods? Or perhaps a more dangerous label as an up-and-coming neighborhood? To set the stage, let's take a slightly closer look at the Los Angeles that we live in. LA developed into a worldwide recognized leading center of economic and cultural activity. Los Angeles has been ranked 6th in the Global Cities Index and 9th in the Global Economic Power Index. And this is part due to being one of the most substantial economic engines within the United States, with the 3rd largest gross metropolitan product of $831 billion. That was a statistic from 2008. So with its 88 incorporated cities, if Los Angeles were a country, it would rank in at number 21 in the world. If it includes the outside, like Riverside, San Bernardino, it's 16. LA County has surpassed New York in the fashion industry with over 87,000 jobs in the market. And I thought this was interesting. Downtown Los Angeles is the largest government center outside of Washington, D.C. It is one of the most diverse, concentrated areas in the world, with more than half of its inhabitants being multilingual. LA is one of only 2 cities without a majority population. This city, which we call our home, has people from 140 countries, speaking approximately 224 languages. And Los Angeles is only one of 2 cities, I'm sorry, I already said that, without a majority population. So LA residents identify themselves as the following. And again, this is how they identify themselves. Hispanic or Latino of any race. I know there's problems with that term, but that's how people identify themselves as 48.5%. White, non-Hispanic, 28.7%. Asian Pacific Islander, 11.4%. African American, 9.6%. American Indian or others, 1.8%. And again, we'll have someone speaking some about this, but this differs a lot from like what's in the populations in prison and poverty. And then just as a quick little tidbit, 61% of housing units are rented. So there'll be some talk about renting. So what constitutes a gentrification? This is from Wikipedia. We really like the definition. Gentrification is a dynamic that emerges in poor urban areas when residential shifts, urban planning, and other phenomena affect the composition of a neighborhood. Urban gentrification often involves population migration as poor residents of a neighborhood are displaced. In a community undergoing gentrification, the average income increases and average family size decreases. This generally results in the displacement of the poor, pre-gentrification residents who are unable to pay increased rents, property tax, and unable to afford real estate. Often old industrial buildings are converted to residence and shops, like in downtown LA. New businesses which can afford increased commercial rent cater to a more affluent base of consumers, further increasing the appeal to higher income migrants and decreasing the accessibility to the poor. Often resident owners unable to pay the taxes are forced to sell their residencies and move to a cheaper community until it becomes cool, like Highland Park. So if this sounds familiar, it's because we're in the eye of the storm, is that the expression? So we set up a board outside asking the question, what does gentrification look like? So these are your answers.
Okay, so that's great, it's full. Okay, so what does gentrification look like? Shit, sorry for a slap in the face, selling out, skyrise developments, whiteness, overpriced cafes, displacement of communities, greed, hipsters, urban sprawl, colonization, Silver Lake, Skid Row. My favorite place is not there anymore. Yeah, wanted, now wanted. New businesses that don't serve old residents, Chavez Ravine, progress, economic opportunity, mobility, forgetting your past, fascism, Galician Valley, sad, and assimilation. So this is just really good for all of us because, yeah, Andrea read the Wikipedia definition, but for us, you know, it means also like our stories, like what are people's stories, right? And what are, like, how do we break gentrification down? So really, that's good. So I don't know.
Thank you, Charlie, for sharing this. So, political action, either to promote or oppose gentrification, is often the community's response against unintended economic eviction. However, local government may favor gentrification, and a lot of us know this, because of the increased tax base associated with the new high-income residents, as well as because of other perceived benefits of moving poor people and rehabilitating deteriorated areas, right? So that obviously there's a worth placed on on working classes and whether they're worth investing in. So to measure gentrification, we looked at some things that are often indicators that are analyzed. These aren't necessarily across the board. There's a lot of variety of how people interpret gentrification, but for statistical reasons, generally they measure the educational attainment, the proportion of the population over the age of 25 with a bachelor's degree or higher. This comes into question as how about those of us who have a bachelor's degree or higher but are coming from those communities and our families are still part of that community? Are we outside of it? Are we then gentrifiers? So there's a lot of complexities with these. High rent units, which is the proportion of units in a station area paying over the citywide median gross rent. And high income households, the proportion of households in a station area earning over citywide median income. So today we present to you our experts on gentrification and activism, a USC professor, a community activist in Loyal Heights, youth working against prison culture in South LA, an artist and activist working on advocacy for recovery in Skid Row, not only with individuals but with policy and legislation, and a political activist sharing her experiences from Atwater Village. So we hope you enjoy, learn, and connect with tonight's programs as we explore the perspective and knowledge from some of our local communities experiencing and resisting gentrifications, and also being an inspiration to us all for continuing to fight and continue to advocate for their communities and for the well-being of their neighborhoods. So with that, we are going to begin.
In this series, now we're on the same, a little bit on the same page of what gentrification is, but we are going to learn from the activists and from experts, from community experts, about their stories. And with me and Andrea are going to be co-facilitating the process, so we're going to be inviting the speakers to come to the podium. Don't be scared. It is scary, but then they'll share, their stories and their expertise. So, without further ado, I would like to present Laura Pulido. And it is with great admiration to introduce Laura Pulido. I first found about Laura Pulido when Cesar read the book Black, Brown, Yellow, and Left, Radical Activism in LA. The book is a case study of 3 different historical political groups in the late 60s. It talks about Black Panther Party, East Wind, and Gaza. It is a good book to read with the collective you're part of because she writes about the strengths and weaknesses of each of the groups and what they contributed to the social justice movement then and now. I was very excited about the book and imagined working with Laura Pulido, so I emailed her and luckily she responded. Has been to her classroom to do a presentation about the work we do, and now she's here with us in this space. It is beautiful to engage in non-academic spaces and be able to talk about the real issues. Laura is currently a professor at USC in the American Studies Department. She researches race, political activism, Chicano studies, critical human geography, and Los Angeles. Her latest book is The People's Guide to Los Angeles, and today Laura will be speaking about the effects of gentrification in our communities. Thank you, Laura. Hi. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Right, that's not too fuzzy? Okay. So thank you, Carla, for that wonderful introduction, and it's really great to be here. Like you said, it's really great to be in non-academic spaces, talking about what I think are really important political issues, which some of us also happen to study. Carla asked me to talk about the history of gentrification in Los Angeles. And so as I was thinking about that, well, what am I going to say? I thought, well, the first thing I really need to do is I need to define gentrification,
because how else do I construct a historical narrative if I don't know what I'm looking for? So I came up with this definition of gentrification that I'm going to share with you. Okay, so I define it as a process of investing capital and political power in a specific location in order to produce a more high-value community. This usually entails displacement of low-value residents. And I love this thing that you guys did up here on the board, because I think this is really, as I go through, I think we're going to really hit on a lot of the issues that you're talking about. And I'm really excited that somebody put colonization up there, because I see tremendous parallels between gentrification and colonization. I'm going to talk about the differences about them for a moment. But to go back to this definition, one of the things that I think is really important is to recognize that the goal of gentrification is not to displace people, as much as we focus about that and talk about that, and that is a great concern. The goal is to produce more profit for a range of different actors. And this includes people like landlords, realtors, builders, bankers, architects, and the city itself, as was pointed out through the tax revenues. Now, in order to do that, to get that extra profit, it's necessary oftentimes to get rid of low-value people, all right? One of the problems with low-value people is that their low values tend to spill out everywhere, right? They have low rents, they have blight, there's crime, they have negative representation, they have, lots of people sent to prison, right? These are kind of the dominant narratives we have in our society about what constitutes low-value people. Now, because we live in a highly racialized society, and race is one of the central axes of difference in the United States, it is usually people of color who constitute the low-value people that we are talking about. The point is to make more money because there is the possibility of making more money. It's not that somebody needs to make more money. It's not that somebody needs to do this in order to eat, right? But it's this other kind of possibility that presents itself. The city itself is an essential part of the capital investment cycle. Capital is continuously looking for investment opportunities. And just as capitalism itself creates what we call low-value communities, which are really poor people, and they're created through low wages, joblessness, poor education, lack of investment, and incarceration. What the market does, it can harness these differentials to create value and ultimately profits. So the fact that capitalism itself creates what we consider high-value and low-value communities, that differential then is leveraged to create value. And that's what's really happening when we're talking about gentrification. These processes are occurring in very concrete spaces throughout cities, throughout the world. So this is how I conceptualize gentrification and how it operates. So once I had thought about what it really is and what's going on, so then I had to think about the history of gentrification in Los Angeles. Now, given the fact that much of LA's wealth has been created through real estate development and speculation, I knew that gentrification would have very deep roots here in a place like Los Angeles. But when did it really start? I never really thought about that until I was asked that question by Carla. So lately, I've been working on this other project all about the history of racial violence in Los Angeles. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about the 18th and 19th centuries here in LA. And so I immediately began thinking about the Spanish, the missions, and the Indians. And here we have a situation where the Spaniards come in, they kick the local Tonga off the land, they claim it as their own, leave the people homeless, and even force them to work on the land that they used to live on and they used to own. Now, this is quite horrific, this story that I'm sure you're all familiar with, but it doesn't qualify as gentrification. It's true that the Spanish were trying to create a more high-value community, which would have been them themselves, right? But the Spanish were not operating in a capitalist economy. They did not approach Alta California seeking exchange value. Their relationship to the land was rooted in what we call use value. And these are two really important ideas when we're talking about gentrification. Use value and exchange value. Now, use value. This is the idea that we approach land, our relationship to land is based on the various services that land can provide us. Things like home, community, food, beauty, sustenance, recreation, a sense of place. And from your board up there, I know all of you know what that is when I talk about those use values of land. And then there's exchange value, all right? Now, if you focus on exchange value, your relationship to land is really about how much money you can get from exchanging it through buying, selling, or renting. All right, so the land takes on a whole different kind of relationship in use value versus exchange value. Now, the Spanish in the 18th century saw land as fields to be planted, souls to be converted, and land to be claimed for the crown. These are all, for the most part, use values that we're talking about. They certainly weren't good. They were incredibly evil, but it is use value. And then I thought, let's move ahead 100 years, right, to the point of U.S. conquest in the 1840s. Now here we have Anglo-Americans coming in and definitely wanted to create a higher value community filled with white people. Now we have lots of evidence about how they thought about the Californios and the Mexicanos that were living here at the time. They considered them to be lazy, not very industrious, racial mongrels. They felt that they did not make very good use of the land. The land was wasted in the hands of the Mexicans. The whites wanted to come in and put the land to a much more productive kind of use. What they really wanted to do is they saw the possibilities for agriculture versus ranching. And in turn, they could then sell the products of their land. They could sell the hides, wine, oranges, grains, and things like that. In addition, the Anglo-Americans also recognized that they could make money selling the land. So here we have the beginnings of approaching land as an exchange value, not just as a use value. In contrast, the Californios strictly approach land in terms of its use value. So at conquest, we're getting close to gentrification here in the evolution of white California, but we're not quite there yet. We really get there in the late 1800s, when we begin to see what most people would consider to be contemporary gentrification in its most common form. And one of the first places we see it is we see it with the expulsions of Mexicans from downtown Los Angeles. As more and more Anglo-Americans, and I don't always call them white folks because if you look carefully at this period among the Californios, they really do distinguish what they call the white Californios from the non-whites, right? There are really important racial distinctions within Mexican hierarchy at this time. But anyway, as the Anglo-Americans begin moving in large numbers, they want to live downtown. That's where everything is happening, down near Olvera Street, right? The Mexicans, for the most part, they lived in both rural areas, the ranchos, but most of them lived in the town itself. They wanted to be in the town. But as they lost their status, their land, and their wealth, and became minoritized, the incoming population pushed them eastward. And this is the beginnings of the greater East Side, what we now know as this largest Spanish-speaking population in the United States today. The place where we're standing on has its roots as a Latino community in the late 1800s. So whites wanted this land to live in, but they also wanted it for investment purposes. And if you look at the maps between, in the mid-1800s, you can see a tremendous difference. Maps around 1840 are approximate drawings of landholdings. They show the water, the trees, the houses, where the cattle roams. They're not very specific because that really wasn't so important. By 1870s, however, the land is neatly divided up into very precise parcels, all ready for sale, for exchange. So it's right here where we begin to see land being commodified and exchange value replacing use value in the way that we are approaching land in our relationship to it here in Los Angeles. The other thing that happens by the late 1800s is there's already a large Chinese population in downtown, and they live where Union Station currently is. The Chinese lived there, of course, because they were not allowed to live anywhere else because of racial discrimination, but they also found some comfort in living with each other. These people we're talking about are 100% immigrants at this point in time. Many of them do not speak English, and they also have no right to buy land in California because of a whole variety of racist laws which preclude them from buying property. So they are a very vulnerable population. Thus, when the city decided around the turn of the century that they needed a train station, it was right in Chinatown that they decided that they were going to build it. Now, this is a very particular form of gentrification, what we saw, what happened to the Chinese in terms of Union Station. The local state used eminent domain for a public works project. And eminent domain is the power that the state has to kick you out if it has a project to build, which it feels is in the benefit of the larger community, all right? And we have many examples here in Los Angeles of communities being displaced in terms of eminent domain. We have roads, ports, airports, train stations, and of course, the freeways. And in fact, most of these projects usually, not always, but usually do benefit the community as a whole. But if you notice also, it is overwhelmingly the most vulnerable who are typically displaced. Rarely do you see wealthy people, and especially not wealthy white people, who are ever displaced for a project for the community as a whole. And then, of course, we have the story of Chavez Ravine in the 1950s. This is another example of a public works project. In this case, there was supposed to be built a large, racially integrated public housing project just north of downtown. There were 3 Mexican rural communities that were living there at the time: Bishop, La Loma, and Palo Verde. Unfortunately, there was massive resistance on the part of the real estate lobby to the idea of public housing. And ultimately, they managed to kill the project. But, of course, after the people had already been displaced. After that, the Dodgers were able to pick up the site for a song and built the Dodger Stadium. What's important to this story, though, is the way the real estate industry saw public housing as depriving them of future profits and possibilities. While the housing may have been good for the general public, it was not good for the real estate industry, or so they felt. And again, it's very important to appreciate the importance of the real estate industry to the economic history and geography of contemporary Los Angeles. I want to now jump ahead to the contemporary period and highlight 2 recent innovations in LA gentrification. They're actually happening in all US cities, but I'll just talk about the LA examples. And these are neoliberalism and what I call amenity-adjacent gentrification, which are fairly recent developments here in LA. Now, neoliberalism is a term that gets kicked around an awful lot these days, and I'm going to define it as a political ideology that believes that social problems can best be solved via free markets. It's an ideology that ensures that the rich will get richer, and also serves to expand the rights of capital. We can see this, for example, in the Supreme Court decision, Citizens United. Neoliberalism is also reflected in urban policy, and we see this, for example, in the selling off of public assets, such as schools, transportation systems, pools, and public housing. I know somebody recently told me, oh, you should go sign up your kids for swimming lessons at the Sierra Madre pool, the city of Sierra Madre. So I went online and I looked, and it was like, oh, a complete private vendor is now operating the pool, and the city of Sierra Madre no longer does. Needs to say it's no longer free, right? So this is a very common pattern that we see in this moment that we're living in. And this, of course, is reflected in gentrification. What it does, neoliberalism, is it provides new tools and strategies for gentrification. In particular, we see how the local state partners with the private sector in order to transition areas from low value to higher value. One example that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with are BIDs, or Business Improvement Districts, right? And their local security forces. Now, BIDs are groups of business owners that get together to improve their shared space. They realize that the city does not have a whole lot of money. Of course, it doesn't because of neoliberalism, where all the corporations don't pay taxes anymore. And so now they have to do it on their own, which I can appreciate that. But one of their primary concerns, of course, has been about the low-value people, right? Who they consider to be a drag on their business. And what we're really talking about here are homeless people, poor people, those who cluster in downtown in need of local services. Now, at one point, the city actually created a zone for exactly those services. They realized that people had to go somewhere, for example, to have essential services, so let's put them together and make it relatively convenient. But local businesses decided then that they did not like that. So, what to do? How to get rid of it? They create their own security forces to harass and intimidate these people and ultimately to get them to leave. Thus, they can more easily go about the business of converting the site to a high-value kind of place. The last kind of gentrification I want to mention is what I call amenity-adjacent gentrification. Now, it used to be, I remember like in the 70s and 80s, nobody in LA wanted any project near them, especially people on the west side. They resisted all kinds of public works. Their number one complaint was the traffic. We don't want more congestion. We don't want undesirable people. We don't want loss of neighborhood character. We don't want the crime, blah, 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 blah. As you all know, finally in the 1990s, LA starts building a light rail system. This was a huge cultural and political breakthrough in Los Angeles' culture. It was really just unbelievable that this finally happened, given the historic opposition people have had to these kinds of projects. It started with the Blue Line, and they've been building ever since, as you know. I came on the Gold Line here today, for example. I'm from Pasadena. Now, many observers in the 1990s said that LA was too low density to really support a vibrant rail system. You got to have points of concentration to make a rail system work and pay for itself. Thus, from the very beginning, the rail system was intended to produce higher densities. The city began pushing mixed-use projects, for example, in terms of housing, retail, commercial, which all encourages high density. They began portraying high density living as fashionable. They began commissioning major developments near train stops. And if you ride the train today, you can see this changing landscape, all right? Now, I'm not saying this is necessarily a bad thing, but it's a very conscious kind of thing. And what we have to do is be very attentive to the consequences and how we go about the business of creating denser cities, if in fact that's what we want to do. As they went ahead doing this, we began to see these greater high-density developments occurring sprinkled throughout the city. And in most of these cases, somebody was displaced to make that happen, right? Such as the local kind of, like at Mariachi Plaza, where I came in here today for this event. And with that, there is the growth of gentrification as more and more people see these places as particularly desirable places to live because of the local amenity that is the rail. People are tired of commuting in places like Los Angeles, especially the long commutes, you know, half hour, 2 hours. It's like, why not live downtown? Why not live near the train station, right? I used to remember in East LA at the time, like again, when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, you would never see a white person here in East LA, right? That was just like way too dangerous. It was really, seen as this very crime-infested place. Why would a white person go there? We've seen a very different thing, change of thinking on the part of more and more people, especially with the rail going through, as East LA, parts of it are seen increasingly as desirable locations, largely because of the transit system, right? Now, there's many other examples that we can discuss in terms of gentrification. There's certainly USC, my employer, who's one of the largest gentrifiers in the whole city of LA. There's LA Live, Koreatown, Bunker Hill, the largest standing gentrification project in LA. Echo Park has got a movie now about it, Quinceañera and gentrification. Long Beach, Old Town Pasadena, all of these places have been sites for gentrification, which just goes to show you what an important part of our contemporary economy it is for developers, builders, and for capital looking for sources of investment. But hopefully this will serve to give you a clear idea of what gentrification is and how it has worked historically here in Los Angeles. Thanks.
All right, thanks. We can get another round of applause, please. So the next part of the program will be, we have our expert community members who will be talking about their particular community, what gentrification means to them, how it's affecting them. They'll have 10 minutes, so they'll present here at the podium, and then after everyone's done, we'll have a Q&A, and we'll end with a poem from one of our youth members who's going to be performing a poem about her thoughts on gentrification. And we'll have the outside area open for a while for everyone to mingle. There's still food available here for the racketeers from MacArthur Park, which are fundraising. They're trying to make $150. So that's, and again, we want to say thank you very much to all of you for showing up here, coming on Thursday evening to support this event, to learn more about this issue that has been a lot on our minds, especially with the weak attempts to supposedly support communities. Oh, you know, we're building these huge buildings, but 30% will be mixed income or low income, and they're weak efforts that are often not really helping our communities at all, and are still slowly a way to push us out. So we also wanted to welcome the Wyverwood community, who were next door at the Kevin de Leon conference meeting, and they're here. Muchas gracias. Queremos darles una bienvenida. Muchísimas gracias al Comité de Esperanza de Wyverwood. Ellos van a mandar una petición por el cuarto para tener apoyo de nuestra comunidad para que no destruyan a Wyverwood, que queda aquí en Boyle Heights. So they're going to be sending out a petition to help preserve Wyverwood and their awesome communities, and we have again Luis Salinas who will present. So again, thank you very much to everyone here, and here's Carla.
So thank you Laura Pulido, and now I'm going to be introducing Luis Salinas. So Luis, he received his degree from UC Santa Barbara in Chicano Studies, LGBT Studies, and Spanish Studies. Wow. And now he's an organizer for Healthy Homes Collaborative. Luis is a resident of Wyverwood, will be speaking about his involvement with Comité de la Esperanza, that's mobilizing the community to resist gentrification in Boyle Heights and the demolition of Wyverwood. So Luis, come on. Yay!
I'm not used to talking in front of people, so I'm a little bit nervous here. I'm 27 years living in Wyverwood, and Wyverwood is actually one of the largest garden apartments west of the Mississippi River. It holds about 1,187 units or homes for about 6,000 people. I grew up there, so I know most of the people there. I mean, I feel like growing up, I didn't really understand the power of community because I was so used to being around it. And it wasn't until I had to leave Wyverwood to go study somewhere else that I understood what that community meant. You know, I grew up with cultural events that the community, an organization within Wyverwood, which is el Comité de la Esperanza, and they've been there since '84. They were started by a priest from a local church, and they had cultural events. They had a lot of popular religiosity events like posadas, you know, the Passion of Christ. They had toy drives for the children, and then they had sports activities for adults and children as well. They had soccer tournaments, they had volleyball tournaments, they even had small concerts and talent shows where the community would just come out and be a part of the event. So for me growing up, it was sort of this norm. You know, I didn't really see anything else besides that. And it wasn't until I went to Santa Barbara that I realized how much I missed that and how meaningful that is. And so coming back to Wyverwood, I began to see what was happening with the community. The landlord or the developer put a plan to demolish all 1,187 units and build 4,400 condos. 232-story towers, you know, and I mean, build streets in between this big garden apartment. I mean, there's open fields where people can go run, play soccer. You're basically living inside a park, you know. And so all of that with this plan would be gone because the developer wants to build in streets, wants to build, you know, these big towers and condominiums. and about 60% as to what the plan is proposing is that up to 60% of the new development would be for affordable housing. Now you have 6,000 people living there, living under rent control, you know, and one of the things we found out as a community that is working towards not getting these apartments demolished is that in Los Angeles, rent control is a big thing, and you're paying low rent if you live in housing that was built before 1978. Now, when you completely demolish a whole building, you lose that rent control. So for a lot of these people, a lot of the community that I come from wouldn't be able to afford living there with the new plan. Coming back to the community and seeing how involved my neighbors were and seeing the effect that it would take on my neighborhood, my community, and my own family. I mean, in that place I have aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters, I have nieces and nephews. I have a long history with Wyvernwood because that's actually where my parents met as well. So there's generations of my family that have been living in Wyvernwood as well. And it's a meaningful thing for us because it has maintained us united as a family as well. And a lot of the things that we fear is that all of that will be lost with this new plan that is trying to get accomplished here. And the way all of this goes into gentrification is that, you know, people are not going to be able to afford the new plan. A lot of the people there are working class people, you know, they earn minimum wage. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 families living in one unit already. And with this new plan, you know, the rent is going to go up for some of the people and they're going to have to move out. So there's that form of displacement. There's also people that have been kicked out already, not kicked out forcefully, but there's been harassment issues. There's been people that have been pushed out, either through complaints that the developer has put out, you know, because you either have loud music or you're sitting outside your porch. The events that El Comité de la Esperanza has put out, unfortunately, have minimized because of the lack of support from the developer. There have been, we used to have soccer tournaments and volleyball tournaments for the community, and now we're not really allowed to have these events because of, according to the developer, liability issues. So the community there is being pushed out slowly, and El Comité has been a huge part of the community that's been pushing to fight back and not let this plan pass and demolish all of these homes. One of the things that we focused on is working within the community and getting support outside of the community as well. We've been helped by many organizations outside. There's local artists that are also involved. There's artists that live in Wyvernwood that have created art, that have helped us organize events. One of the big events we had was a march on May Day from Wyvernwood to City Hall to get the council member of our district, which is Wisak, to come out from one of his meetings at City Hall and show his support for the community of Wyvernwood against the demolition of the apartments. We actually accomplished that. We had danzantes come out, we had jaraneros come out, we had the community come out, we had other organizations come out and walk with us. And in fact, even the police was actually very helpful to march with us or lead us all the way to City Hall. he came out and he did show his support for Wyvernwood. So that was a big accomplishment for us. Another thing that we have fought and we won was the neighborhood council of Boyle Heights actually had voted in support of the plan without the members of Wyvernwood or El Comité de la Esperanza know that they were going to be voting on this, decide on the plan, whether they should support it or not. We ended up having to go and do an action on them and show how much the tenants, the community of Boyle Heights was also against this plan. They took away that decision. They decided not to vote for the plan, and they decided so for us here in the community that's out here, we're still struggling. We are on our second hearing. We're waiting for the second hearing to happen with the Planning Commission, and we are asking for support from the community members, from the residents of the city of Los Angeles, in fact. Anybody who's willing to come and support our community, we're more than happy to, have your support. If you're interested, you can come up to me or some of the community members that are out here so they can talk to you and give you a little bit more information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis, and thank you, Wyvernwood community. They're a really hard-fighting community. They're so organized, and we've had the pleasure to be with them on some of their campaigns. And I mean, they're out there. They're just doing a lot of work. So it's really inspiring for us to get to learn from them and learn from their organizing as well. So it's with great pleasure that I present Kevin Michael Key. Kevin Michael Key is a former criminal defense attorney who now uses his educational talents and training to advocate for Skid Row, Los Angeles community, where he lives and works. A native of New York City, he grew up in the community of Harlem and Brownsville ghettos. He earned a GED in the Brooklyn House of Detention before entering a joint BA-JD Urban Legal Studies program, where he graduated with honors. Mr. Key became Kevin Michael K on July 12, 2002, when he began his new life as a clean and sober member of Skid Row. He has 5 grandchildren and enjoys walking the 8- and 10-year-olds to summer arts camp in Skid Row. And he has learned that service to others has allowed him to be more appreciative of his gifts. So CISA worked first with Kevin Michael Key when we did an educational experience in Skid Row, just kind of learning how issues there affect our communities and how much we had in common. He's just incredible. He just laid it out for us. I remember one of the things that we were all really stuck with us as a criminal defense attorney. He said, he had this experience. If you're of color, you're more likely to get stopped. If you're stopped, you're more likely to get searched. If you're searched, you're more likely to get convicted. If you're convicted, you're more likely to serve a harsher term. And on and on and on. And so now he's doing, he's had all this knowledge, and now he's in a community, and he's not, he did policy work and all this stuff, but I work in Skid Row, and I'm always seeing him out on the streets. I'm always seeing him talking to people, doing incredible activism. Like, he's there. So it's a pleasure to have him here with us today.
Thank you so much, Andrea, Cessa. Hey, this is just cool, man. All my life I want to be cool, but looking out here at all of you people, especially the young people, getting involved, doing some things, standing up, because it's your voices, you're the ones that are going to make some change. That's why I sat over there with my YJC homies. I call myself the oldest YJC man. They keep me young, but it's really what you guys can accomplish. See, gentrification, I'm so glad that Professor Polito was here to, give, real reasoned and thought out definition, historical perspective. I remember when instead of gentrification, and I bet she probably does too. You remember blockbusting?
Yeah.
Anybody here know what blockbusting is?
Yes.
What is blockbusting?
Where you go and you rent the movies. Where you used to rent movies. Before Netflix.
It's the opposite of gentrification. Used to be when y'all moved in, or we moved in, excuse me, what am I thinking? When we moved in, they moved out.
White flight.
Oh no, there's a black Mexican on my block. I got to go. Now you see one white people worry, be afraid. But really, across this nation, across the world, the people with money want to be in these protective enclaves, near their money, near the seats of power, where the police can surround them and protect them from folks that look like us. That's just the truth. And first of all, I gotta thank Aunt Graham. She was talking about me walking my grandkids to school. She's the one that got them into that summer arts class. And it's been a really wonderful experience for me. Because I get to play grandpa. I watch my kids. I was a single parent, and you stretch out and see, they don't allow families in Skid Row. Or I should say this better. The part of Skid Row where I live is SRO, single rooms only, right? They call it a black. They use city ordinances and zoning codes and all of that to separate our family. Now, I'm a member of a number of organizations. I'm not going to name them all, but one of them is Critical Resistance, which is a prison industrial complex abolitionist organization. And we look at how the prison industrial, not just the prisons, mind you, but the whole supportive system of that goes to devalue people and devalue entire communities of folks. And that's what they've done with Skid Row. They decided this community was a blight when it became real evident that the land was of value. Then all of a sudden people started having less value. And Skid Row didn't just come upon us by happenstance. As Laura said, it was planned. We'll put all of the services here, and then we'll pull all the people that need those services there, and then the rest of the city could be Hollywood make-believe pretty. And then all of a sudden, a guy named Tom Gilmore, all right, a major landlord, had a bright idea, let me start converting these abandoned old bank buildings and commercial spaces into residential properties and commercial properties. And guess what happened? He went to the politicians, he sold them on the idea of a new downtown, a revitalized downtown. And then like in the old Cowboys movies, the settlers come in, they start calling themselves urban pioneers. And they begin to devalue the people, right? The value of the land goes up, and the people that are there, if they look like us, they're even more devalued. So we started moving people out. One thing I don't know all of the definitions of gentrification, but I know it looks pretty. I know that when they want to gentrify someplace, they come in with poster boards and PowerPoint, and you know, and they make it look good. And in order to make it look real good, they got to make us look real ugly. Same way you do with prisoners, right? People who are incarcerated, critical resistance. We resist the language that they place on us. We resist the characteristics that they place on us because we have value, inherent human values. And it's not about how much the land is worth. It's about what we can do in terms of our safety, in terms of making a better space for all of us. So the people of Wyverwood, I may not pronounce it, but I support you. You have value beyond, I took some notes, beyond the exchange value. There is no exchange for what you bring. And so when we look at issues of safety, when we look at, all of that comes from community, from knowing your neighbor, right? And so that's what we seek. So I put some real quick notes. So the new downtown, like I said, it sounds good. There's pretty pictures, there's a PowerPoint, and there's dreams of thousands and millions of dollars. What Skid Row has meant to me has been the world's largest recovery community. You know, I used all types of illegal drugs for 40 plus years because I was a lawyer, because I did have insurance and hospital stuff. I tried to get sober all over this country. It wasn't until I came to Skid Row that I was able to stop and stay stopped. And why? Because I saw the value of the people, and I saw the value of giving up myself. And the more I gave, the more I got, right? So you can have all your pretty posters, you can have your exchange value. All I know about where I live is that it saves people's lives one day at a time, all right? One of the things, so part of what I'm doing is trying to change the narrative and increase the value by talking about Skid Row as the world's largest recovery community. And you may want to talk in terms of your community, as this brother here said, in terms of what real safety, what real community does for people. There is no neighborhood signage. You'll see the toy district. You'll see the old bank district. You won't see the Skid Row district though. So we're going to do something about that. The people in Wyverwood, you're trying to move them out. They're going to offer some relocation fees. It's been my experience. It's never, ever enough. If you're actually giving people $20,000, $30,000 as mandated by law, how much is each unit really worth if you're willing to give us that much? What we see is in Skid Row a criminalization of an entire class of people based on geographics, right? So not the last time I saw her, because she did come out to her health and wellness, but when I saw you at Art Walk, right? At Art Walk, you see all of these folks walking around and drinking, and it's public, you know, and that's one night a month, the second Thursday, I think, of the month. You let somebody look like me or look like Mr. Cabrera there walk around with a glass. Matter of fact, it don't even have to be, if it's a brown bag, we getting stopped up against the wall, right? So, you know, part of gentrification is the selective enforcement of the laws, you know, against people that look like me. And that's what happened with Trey. That's, I got glasses, I can't read myself. Anyway, I would like to end just to say, as a member of critical resistance, like I said, we're PIC abolitionists, which means that we're against that whole institution. Because one of the things we found is that it allows these systems to detract from our humanity. We need to find new ways to deal with our situations. Communities, building is what's going to make us safe, not a new high-rise. Thank you.
Just to let you know, Barbara will be passing out a petition at the end of the program, and if you all can take a look at it and read it, please, and sign it. So actually, interestingly, when I saw Kevin Michael Key at the Art Walk, we were hanging out where there was folks there in front of the LA CAN building, which is activism for folks in Skid Row, and they were playing music. And all of a sudden, like a group of like 7 security people just came, and they were just like hanging out, and they were asking questions, and you know, there was music all over Skid Row. There was like, you know, things out on the sidewalk, but they were asking, when are y'all wrapping up? You know, this is over. So there's been a lot of instances that we've experienced, folks that work in the area, that just don't make, that only make sense if you're of a certain color. So the next folks that we're going to present is the Youth Justice Coalition / Free LA, and they're working to build a youth-led movement by challenging race, gender, and class inequality in the Los Angeles County juvenile injustice system. They're working to transform a system that has ensured the massive lockup of people of color, widespread police violence, and distrust between communities and police, and the vast disregard for youth and communities' constitutional rights, and has built up the world's largest prison system here in the United States. So we met Leslie at a prison abolitionist conference. She did an amazing job. We were just so impressed by the work being done by young people. So we're presenting today both Emilio and Leslie.
What's up, everyone? It looks like it's getting kind of dead in here. It's all right, we'll liven it up in a minute. I just want to introduce myself first. My name is Emilio. I'm an organizer with the Youth Justice Coalition in South LA.
Hey, what's up? My name is Leslie. I'm a youth organizer and also a graduate from GLA YGC.
So the first thing that I wanted to do to get kind of people, you know, thinking and talking a little bit more, because I know you all have been very patient, very attentive. Maybe we'll take like about 30 to 45 seconds to just talk to the person next to you or someone around you about what gentrification means to you, and then we'll bring it back, all right? So go ahead, don't be shy. Sorry to break it up, I know we heard a lot of good conversations, but we just wanted to get you activated again so we can bring it back. I just kind of wanted to get that hunger for having those conversations with other people, you know, because y'all been sitting for a long time. So hopefully we take those conversations to our next portion of the event after this. So thanks for participating in that. Thank you, whoever shushed. I didn't want to do that, I felt that was too authoritative. First I wanted to say that I really appreciate being here. Thanks for Mr. Key to getting us here too. And we're really inspired by this event, and that I wouldn't consider us experts, like we're involved in the community and so are all of you. So I'd just like to start by saying all of us are experts, I would say, because we're all community members, we're all here today, we all care about this, our families are affected by this. I wanted to also do something else. I wanted to take a short moment of silence for all the folks that were either missing or have been lost in this unjust, racist, corrupt system that we're living in right now. Anywhere from Trayvon Martin to Oscar Grant, D'Angelo Lopez, who's a family member of one of our coworkers at the YJC who was killed by Compton sheriffs last month. So maybe think about someone in your life or someone that you care about that is either lost, whether it's by death or, you know, crossing the border, they're incarcerated, someone that you care about. So I just want to take about 20 seconds to do that. So if we could just take a moment of silence and think about that person for a little bit. Thank you. So just try to keep that in mind, right? Is that feeling that you just had, that they're watching us, right? And we're doing this for people that have been displaced all over the world in different capacities, right? So I just wanted to give a brief introduction of what YJC is. Our goal is to end the mass incarceration, criminalization, and deportation of youth of color. Specifically, we're located in South LA, but we work all across LA County and in a lot of coalition as well. We also have a high school. Our main campaign and goal is to end the school to prison pipeline. So what we realized was a big need of our community was, because of zero tolerance policies and racist school administration and school police, a lot of our youth are getting pushed out of their high schools. So what the community really needed was a place where young people could get an education, right? That were either formerly incarcerated or pushed out of their schools. So our school is any ages from 16 to 24. And we don't do the basic, education. We give them like a history of like revolution, history of movement, the history of communities of color, and project-based learning. So they actually get credits for doing organizing with us. Leslie here's a graduate. Let's give it up for her. And they can actually earn a high school diploma by doing this. From what I've seen, and how a lot of us feel, we talk a lot about how the war on gangs and the war on drugs causes mass incarceration, right? School push out and criminalization of youth. I feel like gentrification is another tool, right? It's a tool of systematic oppression. It's a tool of racist policies. That's another form of colonization and oppressing people of color. It's a war on people of color and it's a war on the poor, right? So when we talk about this, we can't talk about it in a singular issue, right? Because we understand we don't live singular issue lives, right? So like all of us that are here today aren't just here because we care about gentrification, because gentrification is part of an evil system, right? Systematic, institutional way of oppressing people of color. So we look at this, we see school push out and zero tolerance policies and engagement with law enforcement, right? Which is basically an oppressive tool with guns and badges and the state-sanctioned way to police our communities. That also contributes to gentrification, right? Like Michael was giving the example, if you're a black man with a brown bag, you're going to get treated differently than if you're a white man with a brown bag at our block, is one good example. A really pathetic statistic that we always talk about is the United States is 5% of the world's population, but 25% of the world's prison population. So the US alone, we make up a quarter of people that are incarcerated in the world, right? So when we talk about, oh, the US abolished slavery, we've come a long way. No, they just reformed it into another form. I heard two people clapping. Thank you. I mean, we shouldn't be clapping, we should be mad, right? Yeah. Anyways, for me, I have personal experience with gentrification. I live in a neighborhood just north of the 10 off the La Brea exit. When I moved there in the early 90s, and the 1992 uprising happened, and there were people trying to come on our block. We had to like pile cars on top of each other at the street entrances to keep people out, to keep our families safe. They said riots in South Central. Now, like tons of years later, I don't even know the math, it's been forever. Now it's like white people picking up their dog shit like all over the grass, and antique shops and coffee shops and all these bougie little stores and stuff like that. So they totally gentrified my neighborhood. We were the only non-black family living in that neighborhood, and now they want to call it Mid-City West, or like, oh, it's a part of Miracle Mile now. It's by the museum. It's like 2.5 miles from the museum. But so that's my personal experience. And I guess so we have specific forms that we work on, our campaigns around what gentrification is and how it plays out. And so I'm going to pass it to Leslie now. She's going to talk a little about that.
Cool. So again, my name is Leslie. I'm one of the lead organizers in legislation for YJC, so I do a lot of state legislation with the bills that we try to push. So when we were talking about gentrification, I live in the MacArthur Park area where Alvarado is in. I live on Burlington, so that's where like 18th Street is at, and it's all the dangerous neighborhoods or whatnot. And honestly, from my personal experience growing up there, it's not even dangerous if you know the people who you're talking to. So when Rampart got moved from Temple Street, when it got moved to our area, that's when all the corruption began, right? This is when we started seeing all these gang injunctions come out, like the gang injunction that just popped up in Echo Park. They're trying to go through with it because of the new park and because of the new pool layout. And also they're trying to restore the old theaters in the Westlake area by the train station. And they're trying to restore the MacArthur Park area because of the new, the new stage where they do all those free concerts for the community. And I know that Rap is also from MacArthur Park, so that's a lot of love right there because I'm always around there. So basically, we're talking about gentrification and how the white folks are stealing from the colored people folks that's taking our communities. So YUC did a couple of years ago, we came up with this campaign called the LA for Youth campaign. So if you just take 1% from law enforcement's budget, which is the sheriffs, this is countywide, the sheriffs, the LAPD, the courts, the district attorney, and the city attorney. That's over $100 million that can go towards to 50 youth centers, 25,000 youth jobs and no layoffs, and 500 full-time intervention workers. And we noticed that LAPD spent $700 million just on dry cleaning alone. And we're saying with that money, what you can do is that you can clean up Skid Row and house every homeless person in Skid Row with a 2-bedroom apartment for free for 2 years. And so I know that the gang injunction that just popped up is a real big issue right now for the community, especially since I live in an area where it's already, there's already an injunction on there. So we're trying to find ways to get the community involved in the Echo Park area to realize that there's an injunction in their neighborhood. And I spoke to this young lady who, she left, but she gave me some information to give to you guys. So after the 1990s, the Echo Park killings, there were basically 140 killings in the 1990s, and now that we've seen, it's about 15 killings, and they're trying to put an injunction on the whole neighborhood. So what folks that have lived there since the 80s are coming together to actually fight the injunction that's happening. The city attorney basically said that we're putting this injunction because of the new restored park. Because people feel criminalized and people feel like someone's going to steal from them, so we have to put this injunction and it's very necessary. And so also we noticed that with this injunction that's going to happen is that a lot of people that are going to be criminalized are going to be poor people of color. Just like all of us in this room, I'm going to assume. So the lady told me to tell you guys on Saturday, every single Saturday at 2 p.m. I don't know if you guys know where Echo Park is at. By the picnic tables, by the fountain, they're having a meeting every week to really talk about what we can do to fight this injunction and actually now have the city attorney fight to get the injunction on Echo Park. I just want to talk quickly about legislation because I know I'm out of time. But YJC has 7 bills that are pertaining basically young people. We have a bill that fights for any young person who is under the age of 18 to have a chance to be notified to their parents by the police that they're on the CalGate database, which is a secret state database. And actually that bill got really strong when amendments were added saying that they have the right to appeal and the right to get removed from a CalGate database. So when you're on one of those, you can't even get a job because when they do your background checks, you pop up as an alleged gang member. We also have another bill that any young person who was transferred from the juvenile courts to the adult system and was sentenced to more than 10 years in prison has a chance to get their case reviewed and actually for possible resentencing. So those are a little bit of the bills we're talking about. We have 7 bills, but I know I don't have a lot of time to talk about that, so thank you.
So we wanted to close with a chant that we love to finish, but it sounds like we're going to do something outside. Is that correct? Okay, yeah, so I guess we'll wait till then. Be excited. Thank you.
Thank you to the Youth Justice Coalition. Just really inspired to see youth being organized, and also that it was emphasized that gentrification is a tool that economic system, capitalism uses to divide people, so that was great. So now we have our last speaker, and then after her, we're gonna have a Q&A, comments, and it's gonna be facilitated by CESA member Jay. So that's gonna happen in a little bit. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Comrade Yvonne Bonilla. She's a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. She grew up in Atwater Village and experienced gentrification firsthand. She's now a student at PCC, Pasadena City College, and will discuss gentrification as another symptom of capitalism that promotes consumption and modification. So, Yvonne.
Thank you, Carla. And I'd just like to thank Carla and everyone at CESA for inviting me here and letting me be part of this panel. So like she said, I'm Yvonne and I grew up in Atwater Village, and I'm just here to talk about what I experienced there growing up. And I know that we already have this image of what Atwater Village looks like. It's kind of the odd man out in this panel discussion of neighborhoods. But currently it's associated with wealthy residents. It's smack in the middle of Silver Lake, Los Feliz, and Glendale. It's like a hipster area, like overpriced coffee shops and bookstores and all those things. And if you're one of those people that have that idea of Atwater, you're right, that's what it was like now. But I grew up there and it wasn't always like that, and it's been a complete transformation from when I grew up to what it is now. And so I'm just here to share that experience. So my parents moved my family to Atwater in 1992. Both of them were undocumented, and both had only recently migrated to Los Angeles a few years earlier from El Salvador. And before we moved, my parents, my elder sister and I, we all lived in Westlake. And so we lived there for a few years, and that's the hub of Central American and Latino people that first come to Los Angeles. So we lived there for a few years. And it was only after my father, who was an electrician, and my mother, who worked as a domestic worker and as a live-in nanny and daycare, maid, they were able to save some money and buy a house. And at the time, Atwater Village is one of the most affordable neighborhoods in Los Angeles, and so that's why they decided to move there. I was 2 years old when we moved, and growing up, I remember thinking how diverse the neighborhood was. It was definitely a majority Latino neighborhood. But there were still lots of other people that lived there. I remember in elementary school, my classmates were majority Latino. There was a huge Filipino, Chinese, and African American population in Atwater. And most of the people that lived in those neighborhoods were all working people. Also, a little bit more about what it looked like. The main strip in Atwater Village is Glendale Boulevard, and at the time, that was just mostly mom and pop stores owned by members of the community. The big grocery store was owned by a Latino family that lived there for decades, and so before the gentrification happened, it was a completely different neighborhood. So what happened was that in the late 1990s, a new trend that began to sweep not only Atwater but just across Southern California was gentrification. And this trend was making its way to Silver Lake and other neighborhoods that were very working class, along with Atwater Village and places like Eagle Rock. And so there were these new forces that were coming into play that would change the image of this neighborhood that I grew up in and lots of other neighborhoods in Los Angeles between the late 90s and early 2000s. These new forces were the companies and businesses that were trying to expand their base and clientele in these new up-and-coming neighborhoods, that we so call them. And these new companies had lots of money at their disposal and a lot of influence, and Atwater became prime real estate. And this was the period that the neighborhood witnessed new chain stores coming up and all these mom and pop stores disappearing because they no longer had enough money to stay in the neighborhood. I remember it was the early 2000s. One of the grocery stores had closed down because the owner had lost the lease off of the place, and a Starbucks had opened. And if there's ever a beginning of gentrification, it's a Starbucks. And so that opened up in Atwater. And after that, there was just a slew of new businesses that started emerging. A vacant lot in Atwater that used to be a place where people would go buy their trees every year, like they would sell their Christmas trees and It was sold to a development company that turned it into a plaza for real estate places. And so now that's sort of like the main commercial hub in LA. Not in LA, in Atwater. So there's like a Western Union, the Subway, and H&R Blocks, all these different entities that were now in Atwater. And so now, this is what Atwater looks like, and the new culture that began to develop in Atwater as a result of this enveloped little community, and more people began to feel as though they were welcome in the neighborhoods that they had called home for decades. So at the time of this booming retail development, a new influx of people with money and money to spend came. Sorry, I was checking the time over there. And while this was happening, housing prices began to soar. And we can all predict what happened next. People couldn't afford to live there anymore. And so what was once a working class neighborhood with where two documented blue-collar workers like my parents could afford a home became an expensive enclave of wealthy entrepreneurs and people who mostly work in the film and TV industry. And so what was sad to see is as I continued to live there, going on to high school and everything, many of the kids that I grew up with were forced to move away because their families were kicked out by landlords who wanted to make room for the new flow of people who could now afford the higher rent. And the diversity of people in Atwater began to change. It was white people that moved in droves, as the Latinos, as Vietnamese, Filipino, all these other people that lived in Atwater were forced out of the neighborhood because they couldn't afford it anymore. And now in 2013, there was an article in LA Weekly a couple of weeks ago that says that Atwater Village is now like one of the hottest property places in Los Angeles, and all the cool people and all the cool hipsters want to live in Atwater. But that's not what it was before, and that's as a result of the complete transformation of the neighborhood. And my family still lives in Atwater. But they only are able to stay there by the skin of their teeth. Each month they scramble to make their mortgage payments. My father works 7 days a week to make sure that he and my family are able to stay at home. They lived there for the past 20 years. So the gentrification of Atwater took almost a decade ago, but the process that took place is the same one that's taking place now in Echo Park and Loyal Heights and MacArthur Park and all these other neighborhoods in Los Angeles right now. And so my story is very similar to a lot of the other stories that were shared here tonight and that we're talking about. I think, I'm not sure how much time I have, but I'll just go a little bit more into depth about, I'm sorry?
You have about 2-3 minutes.
Okay. Just sort of the forces behind all this. People just frame gentrification in different ways. It's like a displacement of people. It changes the social, economic, and physical aspects of the neighborhood. And others think that it's just an economic process that moves people around and moves businesses in. And these characterizations are correct. Let me skip along here. I don't want to take up too much time. And also, I'd like to point out that gentrification isn't a new process. It's been happening for decades. As I talked about in her talk, but in the 1950s and 60s, the federal government sponsored urban renewal that was popularly described in the Black community as urban renewal in certain cities with lower economic development. And so this has been happening for a long time. And it's a gradual process that unfolds in stages. And usually the first stage is, there's an investment in the community and people develop the land and the people who live there can't afford to stay any longer, which is what's happening in Atwater, which is what's happening in other neighborhoods. There's a new image of these communities as revitalized, and that's what draw people in. But for the people who live there, it's not a new revitalized town. People have lived there for a long time, and so that's why it's such a difficult. Gentrification is just such a difficult process to undergo, and gentrification is a racist process too, because it pushes predominantly people of color and oppressed people out of their communities. And so, how does this relate to to what the housing market is like, and most overall the question is this an institutional thing? does this happen systematically in different communities? And the answer is yes. And the answer to, the reason for that is that under capitalism, housing is a commodity. It isn't a human right, which is what it should be. And so, I'd just like to say, I'll just cut it short here because I don't want to run over time. But you know, the way to combat gentrification is what a lot of these panelists said today: organizing their communities, working together. What you were talking about in Widerwood, the people organized themselves, they marched, they stood up to the people who were trying to develop their community. And it's things like that that we can do together to end, you know, to end people being displaced from their communities. So yeah, I think I'll end it there, and thank you.
Speakers, thank you. I think we all learned a lot about from their stories, you know, from the definition about what gentrification is. But now we're going to turn it to you. If you have any questions or comments, Joel's going to facilitate that discussion. But before that, I have 2 announcements. So, yay, Racketeers, they're almost meeting their goal. I think they raised $94. But yeah, but they have, I think their goal is 150. So if you have any donations or any
We have free water
change.
for any community members if anyone wants water, their water. But we made $91 and we're trying to meet a $150 goal so the Racketeers can go see Fruitvale Station and see the portrayal of Oscar Grant in that situation firsthand. And so we would appreciate that. And also an invitation to come out on Sundays to work with us, get some sweat equity, and pick up a fresh box of produce. Most of it comes from South Central Farm. It's free. And we serve 200 boxes every Sunday. And it's just, you come get a number, go do your, anything else you gotta do, come back at about 3 o'clock, pick up your box, nothing else. So if you are interested, come out and MacArthur Park between Wilshire and 7th on Parkview every Sunday, 5 years strong. Thank you guys for your support.
Also, parking situation, if you park your car at Puente Learning Center, you have to move it because they're closing the center, the school. Okay, so after the Q&A, we have in the courtyard, we're going to have some coffee and pan dulce. Oh yes, we're going to have, do you want to talk? Oh yeah, so after the Q&A, we'll have Jessica Cornejo, who's a student through Heart and Soul Collective. We'll be doing a brief poem. We're really, really excited. This is some of our new material that she's going to be presenting at an event soon. So, okay, so we're going to have coffee and bread, and we're also having Las Fotos project, and he has an exhibit there. You know, it's a mentorship program for young Latina women. So if you haven't seen it already, you can see it after the talk. Okay.
Okay, thank you everyone again for the speakers for sharing their story, and you know, like Yvonne, you know, shared her story of what happened at Water Village. This is, you know, obviously a very important conversation to have, and to really hear the stories directly from the, you know, families that are being impacted, to know that this is actually creating loss and a lot of hurt in the community. So along with that, obviously we do also want to provide the opportunity to open it up, because I'm sure, again, it's not just, you know, the speakers up here are doing the part of the struggle and the work. I'm sure all of you are also somehow involved in the community and bringing new positive change. So if you have any questions or thoughts or comments you want to share, if you want to come over here, there's a microphone over here to line up, and this microphone doesn't work too well, so hopefully it works throughout the duration of the Q&A. But definitely please come up here and share either a comment, thought, or a question that maybe the panelists might be able to address and look into. Okay, so who wants to break the ice and be the first one to ask a question or thought or comment? I'm sure usually once we get through the first person, people will feel a little more comfortable to do that. And again, I think we only have about 10 minutes, so make sure that you get in line. All right.
Hi. So I'm not sure how gang injunctions criminalize youth of color. I'm sure they do, but just for my knowledge, I would like to know more specifically how that operates. So thank you.
explain what a gang injunction is, so I'm really, really happy that you brought it up. So basically, when a gang injunction is listed on a specific area of the city, what they do is that they call that a safety zone. So let's say that I want to put an injunction on this table. So this will be my safety zone, and anyone that lives in it has to follow specific rules. So let's say that my table is consisting of people of color, which is us three, and we'll say that the person asked the question is the cop. Let's say that you're patrolling our table, right? And it's after curfew, so let's say curfew is like 6 o'clock, and you can stop us, let's say at 6:05 you stop us because we passed curfew, and you're subject, and you're allowed to arrest us because of that, and we'll be violated if we're listed on the gang injunction. And even worse, you can pull out what we call as a white card, is that they pull out a white card, and you're allowed to take pictures of our tattoos, of any face scars, of any permanent scars on our body, and you're allowed to put us on the CalGay database, which is actually a secret database that we will never know about, that will never be on. You'll put us on it, and we'll never know that we're on it. You get me? So once you put me on that list, and once you put me on the injunction, when I want to get resources like apply for EBT or something, I won't get it because I'm listed as an alleged gang member, even though I may not be gang affiliated. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Just for specifics, it's actually a civil court order written by the city attorney. So Mike Feuer's our new city attorney. We had Carmen Shutanich, who was horrible. Feuer sucks too, but maybe he'll be slightly less bad. But basically, it's written by the city attorney on a specific alleged gang in a specific community. So basically, they use that as justification to criminalize anyone that lives in that neighborhood. And once they put you on this secret database, that database can be shared with any law enforcement across the entire state, and sometimes even the entire country. And currently there's no right to notification, so you don't have to be notified you're on it. There's no notice to appeal. They don't tell you how to appeal it. And that's it. So then when you get sentenced for even a petty crime, like, you know, marijuana, a small dose of marijuana or whatever, they'll jack up your sentence laws because you're on that database. So it's really racist. Right, time and years.
And then, obviously, that's the beginning of what they call the slippery slope. And as a result of you getting caught up in the criminal injustice system, it impacts your ability to get an education, impacts your ability to certain housing, certain other benefit programs. Ultimately, you end up being stigmatized, unemployable, without a very good education. They work on what they call the school to prison tract. And so as this mix increases and as you get older and older and older, the disabilities, the burden that and you know, it's not to say that we don't bear some personal responsibility, but when we look at California, the 8th largest economy in the entire world, what are we #1 among the 50 states in spending on?
Prison.
Prison construction. What are we 48 to 50 on? We are 50. K through 12 spending. Okay? So, you know, you can see that there's these misplaced priorities, and then housing and all of that is just another part of that.
And so if you want to learn more about the injunction that's happening in Echo Park, tomorrow YJC is actually putting a meeting at the California Endowment that's right next to Union Station from 1 to 3. And so I know that he was talking about the whole PIC, Prison Industrial Complex. What a lot of people are not realizing now that I went to a meeting, the CDCR, who's in charge of the whole prisons in California, are planning to expand another prison, and it's going to cost $810 million by the state. And they're saying, oh, well, we're going to close one prison, well, we just built our 34th prison. And honestly, the guy said it so proudly that it just like broke my heart. And so they're saying, when we're going to make this prison, we're going to make a road so you can go straight to it, but we can't do that because that's going to cost too much money. And so when you start realizing all these funds that are going to the prison system and none are going to education, we're basically saying we're going to screw up our children's future. But I know that these corporations would be perfectly fine.
Thank you. Anybody else want to provide comments, thoughts, or another question?
Hello. My question is, can renters' rent education help prevent rising rent or a symptom of gentrification?
Does anyone want to take that question? Did you understand? You want to repeat it one more time?
The question was, can knowing about your rights as a renter help prevent a symptom of gentrification, or help you at least defend yourself against that? Or is there any sort of right that you have as a renter to avoid a sort of unreasonable rent that you're being charged for?
Luis knows the answer to this one.
I believe, at least with Wyverwood, we were educated about what our rights were and the relocation money and what are, the next steps if the plan was to pass. The thing with the issue is that you have to really look at the laws within the state. There are laws like Costa-Hawkins law, the Ellis Act, that have ways around certain developments that are created where people can actually lose their homes. And that's one of the things where people sort of don't go to. And so for us, because we've already seen that and we already got educated on that, we are fighting the gentrification because there's no actual something concrete that can actually show that we will be protected, or that our homes will be protected, or that there won't be any rent hikes. Is that?
I would say the only thing is organizing, man. All right? Because the money is with the landlords, the courts are with the landlords. It's only when you see significant numbers of people who are willing to come together and stand as one, that you even have a smidgen of a chance. The police might still come out, but very often because of the media that you might be able, so organizing is the answer to almost all of it.
Definitely, organizing is the answer. And also what Yvonne says is really important, that there is no right to housing in the United States, right? It's a commodity. And so you have a very limited set of rights. But one great example of people organizing who really successfully fought against somewhat success against gentrification is FICIT, the Figueroa Corridor for Economic and Environmental Justice. And one of the things that they do is they really place a huge emphasis on tenants knowing their rights from the very beginning, and then they begin documenting infractions. And then they take that collectively and then they use that against the landlords. So again, it's got to be organized, it's got to be collective, it's got to be systematic, but whatever little bits there are of the law, they do use that to their
affordable, or I like to say low income, because affordable, it's like, you're comparing against who. So what are some solutions in terms of us fighting to get something we actually want?
Anyone want to answer?
Really good question, right? I'm not a housing expert, so I don't pretend that I am. But I do know that there's been a lot
so much work on developing alternatives to housing. So for example, in the state of California, it's like incredibly difficult to create a housing cooperative. Why does it have to be so hard? You know, why can't we come together to create a collective housing experience for a set of households, right? Maybe like, even like buying like a fourplex and converting it so you all own one unit. It's really, really hard to do. But so I think that's one area that we need to be working on in terms of changing the laws to make it more possible to create these different kinds of things. And then there's this other kinds of stuff that people are doing on their own, right? In terms of creating alternative kinds of housing projects. Some of them legal, some of them illegal. You know, but I think we need, there has been a huge growth in terms of providing, it may seem like a drop in the bucket still, but there actually has been huge improvement in terms of providing low-income or affordable housing, even in some places like Beverly Hills is supposed to provide affordable housing, but can you afford that? Probably not. So there actually has been a lot of work that's done by some very progressive kind of planners trying to create alternatives, but it's a huge problem. But actually, it's a really growth industry, so I encourage you to get involved.
Yeah. And I would just say, part of doing forums like this, educating yourselves, we hear the term affordable housing. In the Skid Row area, when they talk about, well, we've got this and we've got plans for affordable housing, the formula for affordable housing is 60% of the area median income. So I think that if the area median income is $100,000, that means that an affordable housing unit has housing units where you got to make 60 grand. So it's through forums like this where you learn what the formulas are, and then once you learn what you're up against, that's where you start fashioning solutions. LA can help me learn the affordable housing shell game. Like I said, when they come in, it's real pretty, but it ain't real pretty on the way out for us.
So you're talking about affordable housing, and you know, I was talking to Amelia really quick about the levels of escalation that we use. Is that first you have to start low, and you just can't jump to like, oh, I'm gonna do this, and they're gonna give me what I want, because we've learned as organizers that you just can't walk up to the city hall people or the city council and be like, you know what, I want you to give me affordable housing, because once you become so demanding, they're gonna start zoning you out because they're experts in zoning out people. So what we do is that we use levels of like leverage, you can say, and you have to, like, what I say is that you have to offend them in ways where they don't realize that you're offending them. And it always works, and it works a lot for our legislation. And what YJC did is that we did a chart of city council members, the city attorney, the district attorney, and also the board of supervisors. And we chose who was on our side and who has the most power in the whole county, in the whole city. And that's how you get to choose your targets really good, and that's how you can choose in ways how to talk to them and convince them to like follow things like this. And also what we did is that 2 years ago, we took over an abandoned library in the Crenshaw district for about 40 minutes. Even we were planning for a week, but we got ambushed by a ton of cars and cops and all that stuff in less than 40 minutes because they saw Black and Brown youth taking over a space which we were cleaning, and they called us that we were Occupy LA when we were actually YJC. So levels of escalation always works.
All right, thank you. I think you're getting some time. We're going to have time for one more. We have time just for one more question, and because again, also we do want to provide the opportunity, the space outside for you, everyone, to also share some time together and get to know some other folks who are attending, and maybe also the speakers are going to be able to stick around a little longer. You can also approach them outside, but we have time for one more question.
I just wanted to make a comment. I think it's pretty amazing to realize how important space is to, just like the physical space to community, to organization, or even to democracy. To have a say, you need a place to do it. Think of this building that we're in right now. Like, if we didn't have this access to the space, we wouldn't be able to have these dialogues. And you know, it's just so important to think about like the geography and how important it is to fight for these things. I mean, not even just for, you know, comfortable living or having affordable housing. I mean, this is our well-being as a community, as a democratic nation. I think this is the most important thing that we should be fighting for. And I think this is incredible to be a part of. Thank you, everybody.
For all the speakers, and again, while connected to, you know, the main approach of making sure that we all, you know, organize to make sure that we can, you know, get these spaces and have these conversations, but also again develop a different understanding and change the, you know, the relationship that we have with, you know, with land and space. So up next, I think we're going to be having a performance. So Andrea.
So again, we just want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank the people who volunteered, our panelists, our audience. We've learned a lot, and we've been hearing a lot of people wanting to ask more questions, and unfortunately because of time we can't have any more questions, but we will be working soon on a follow-up event, or an event that will be more discussion-based, audience-based. So please keep your ears out for that. Like us on Facebook, add any ideas. If you have any of your own events, please share them. We'll also be taking down this board. It'll be outside. So if you have any questions that you think you'd like to have answered, or any suggestions you have for a follow-up event, please feel free to write them there so that we're aware of what you would like, because unfortunately we didn't get to all the questions. Another quick announcement, the Racketeers today have made $178. Their goal is 190, so they're almost, oh, their goal is 150, all right, yay! So thank you very much for all of you who donated and purchased delicious vegan tostadas. So to close our program, we're very lucky to have a student who actually approached us once. Two students heard about the event. They approached us and they said, you know, we would love to present this poem. A student named Jessica Cornejo. She's an amazing artist, a brilliant dancer, and poet. I saw her at a show in Watts Village. She does an amazing job. So this is one of her new pieces, and part of it she was writing it during the panel because she felt inspiration about it. So we're really excited. If you can please welcome her with a warm, loud round of applause for Jessica Cornejo.
How y'all doing? Good. Everyone's good. Thank you all for sticking around for me. I appreciate this. Give it up for the panel, please. My name is Jessica. I originally wrote this piece about self-identifying as Chicana, and it sort of morphed, as she mentioned, into what it is now. So towards the middle, I'm like, wait, what? It's because of everything that I heard and all the input and all the inspiration that I drew from this meeting. So here we go.
Go.
Get ready now. Here it is. I am oppressed, degraded, silenced, confined by the social construct of their ignorance and fear. I am judged, mindless, an outcast. I am matter out of place. I am not intelligent, not capable, not worthy enough to be considered equal. I am not bright, not privileged, not pure enough to be considered human. I am forced to speak English, hit when I speak Spanish. This institutionalized racism fears the uprising of my people. I am made to speak Spanish, hit when I speak English. My parents fear the loss of my culture. I am majority, yet still considered minority. I am not light, not dark, not from here, not from there, ni de aquí, ni de allá. I'm not Mexican enough. I'm not American enough. I exist within the imagined balance of borders. And if there was a balance, maybe then they'd see that I am free. I am empowered. I am mindful of who I am and who lived before me. I am passion. I Scouts. I am at Water Village. I am in Huarache on York Boulevard. I am your local artist. I am King Boulevard. I am the Magic Johnson Theater before it became Rave Cinemas. I am the struggle. I am the movement. I am you. You are me, and we are the community. We are the hope. We are the change. We are here. And we are here to stay. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much again. Again, I just want to emphasize this was volunteer run. All these people who I know are extremely busy came to take time out of their day. They worked, they went to school, they did summer camp, and they came here to donate their time. So we're extremely grateful for how easy they were to work with, how inspirational, how all left to learn. And thank you to all of you, because all of you came out of your busy schedules to come here and learn and share. And again, this is our first event, but we hope to have more follow-up events. Please write any questions that you have up, like us on Facebook, send suggestions if you'd like to be part of the planning team for the next one. We're welcoming with open arms. And we do have a tiny little donation green thing right there, a green little container. And that's where we're accepting any donations. If any of you have anything you would like to contribute that goes directly to CSET, helps us put on programming, buy stuff like water and whatever we can. We have a low operating cost. Again, thank you very, very much. Please have fun outside. I believe the Youth Justice Coalition will be leading a chant outside. Right. Oh, they want to do it right here. And then we ran out of bread, but we still have coffee. So again, thank you very much. And a round of applause for all of you here who took your time. We really appreciate it.
We're getting ready to head on out.
And a Wyvernwood petition. If you haven't signed the Wyvernwood petition, we'll have some at the table. Please check it out, sign it. There'll be folks there taking it back. And again, from the bottom of our hearts, thank you very much for spending this time with us. We really enjoyed your energy and your presence.
YGC Global's tradition. Every time we attend an event, or anytime that we do an event, that we host an event, we always end with a Sada Shakur chant, just because we want to feel some empowerment when we leave these beautiful events. So we're asking you guys to stand up, hold someone's hand, put your fist in the air, solidarity, anything. So, put your fist up. You guys ready? Alright. It is our duty to fight! It is our duty to fight! It is our duty to win! It is our duty to win! We must love each other and protect each other! We must love each other and protect each other! We have nothing to lose but our chains! We have nothing to lose but our chains! It is our duty to fight! It is our duty to fight! It is our duty to win! It is our duty to win! We must love each other and protect each other! We must love each other and protect each other! We have nothing to lose but our chains! We have nothing to lose but our chains! It is our duty to fight! It is our duty to fight! It is our duty to win! It is our duty to win! We must love each other and protect each other! We must love each other and protect each other! We have nothing to lose but our chains! We have nothing to lose but our chains!
Thank you, and we'll be seeing you all outside in the courtyard.